Hey guys, just wanted to wish everybody well, and I hope everybody's being safe during this crazy time that we're in with everything that's going on in the world. But I wanted to give you some encouragement today and just kind of talk about some things that have kind of been near to my heart. Something that I feel like God's been kind of speaking to me recently, and it's going to be in one of the stories that I know we all hear about, and one that I'm actually fond of. Kind of a fan of this story. But it's the story of the Israelites, and they get freed from Egypt. They get freed from bondage, and they're physically free, and they get to lead. And Moses leads them out into the wilderness and is leading them to a promised land, leading them to a bright and a better future. But I want to just say this, that even though they were headed to this wonderful future, it wasn't always bright, it wasn't always great, the journey wasn't. And in fact, there was a time when they were looking back at Egypt saying, I wish I could go back. Oh, I wish we should go back to that place. And so I want to read to you one of those instances where they did that. And so we're going to be in Exodus chapter 16, verse 3. And I'll let you find that. You can pause the video if you're looking for it or want to find it. But it says in Exodus chapter 16, verse 3, it says, "The Israelites said to them, 'If only we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and ate the bread we wanted. Instead, you brought us into this wilderness to make this whole assembly die of hunger.'" So they get to this point where they're out in the wilderness, and they get to where things kind of get difficult and things kind of get hard. And then they're looking back to the past and saying, hey, at least we knew what was going on. At least we knew what we had. And they reach this point to where the future is bright and the future carries so much promise. But the past is comfortable. And the past is something that they're used to. They didn't have to guess what was going to happen from day to day. They pretty much knew you're going to get up, you're going to work, you're going to have a certain amount of meals a day. And that was their day. You know, not the greatest time, because they were still slaves. They were in bondage. They were told where to go. They were told what they were going to do. They didn't get paid for this. But it was comfortable. It was predictable. It's something that they were used to. They knew. And so we're going to talk about some things today, because in life, I think we find ourselves in a very similar situation. For me, personally, I've had things in my past where I've been liberated by Christ, because he died for my sin, and I walked in that promise, the hope that we will one day eventually spend eternity with him. That's the hope, that's the promise. But so many times I found myself saying, you know what? You know, what I was experiencing, the sin that I had was so comfortable, right? It was something I knew, and even though I know it was wrong, or even though I know it was that was sin, that was awful, when I look back on it, I mean, it was comfortable. And that's where Satan tempts us, and he says, you know what, why don't you go back to what was comfortable? Why don't you go back to what was easy? Because I know times are difficult, because you're having to make decisions now about staying away from sin, about choosing correct friends to hang around, about the environment that you create, about living for Jesus. And those decisions, I don't know if anybody's told you this yet, but those decisions are not easy. They're difficult decisions that you'll have to face. I'm so glad Jesus didn't just say he didn't say this Christian life was going to be easy. But he did say it was going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it one day when you get to stand before Jesus and he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. You get to spend eternity with him. I want to draw our attention to this one thing, and that is that for us, we have to be more than just tired of sin. We have to be more than just tired of the past. Because I can do a lot of things when I'm tired. When I'm tired, I can finish studying for that test that I have to take in the morning. When I'm tired, I can work in this awful place. I worked at Sonic when I was in high school, and I was tired of working that place, and I hated it at times. But I'll continue to go back and work there. I'll continue to go back to that place because I was tired, but I wasn't done. I wasn't done with it. There was not a time until I finally left that there was no turning back. I always knew I was going to go back there the next day or whenever I had to work again. With sin, we have to reach a place where there's no turning back. We have to reach a place where we're not just tired. Because if we're tired, we can always go back. But we have to reach a place where we're done. We have to reach a place where it's over. There's a song called Burn the Ships by For King and Country. And to hear the guy tell the story of the song is amazing. Because he talks about just a situation, a time that he went through with his wife. And they were dealing with some things and some things with addiction. And they ended up reaching a point to where they had to, it was an addiction to pills, flush the pills. When you flush the pills, you can't get them anymore. He tells a story about a Voyager, which love history, so it just caught my attention. There was this Voyager, and they reached this new land. And some of the guys are there, and it's starting to get a little difficult. And they're like, hey, I want to go back. Hey, let's, there were just talks of leaving and going back to England. And so they were there, and what happened was the guy, the leader, found out about this, and he actually burned the ships. Because once he burned those ships, there was no going back. There was no way they could go back to the homeland. There was no way that they could go back to what was comfortable. He said there's only one way to move, and that's forward. See, when Satan provides us that way back, whenever we feel tempted to go back to sin because it was what was comfortable, it may be comfortable, but it's also holding us back. Those thoughts keep us from going forward. So I want to give you some practical ways that we can move forward. Some practical ways that once we reach a point, we have to reach a point where we're done. Not when we're tired, when we're done. And I want to show you how you can do that. How you can live a life that says, you know what, I'm done with sin. I'm done with the past. Because the past can be good. The past can lead us to things that are better. The past can be something that we can learn from. Right? But the past can hold us back if we let it. So I want to show you some things that we can do to kind of move forward. The first thing I want to show you is that Scripture says Satan is like a lion that roams around seeking of whom he can devour. He's looking for people that he can take on. He's looking for people that he can destroy. That's what he comes to do. To kill, steal, and destroy. And that's what he wants to do to you. But there's some things we can do to combat that. First thing we can do is that we can eliminate those triggers that trigger those thoughts in our mind. Maybe it's that you feel that way when you're alone and when you're by yourself and when you're kind of away from all the distractions. And that's when Satan attacks you. Maybe it's certain friends that you hang around. When you get around that group of people, that Satan will throw that temptation into you. Maybe it's, you can fill in the blank. But you know what triggers, you know what situations that Satan will tempt you in. And it's important for us to get out of those situations. So that's number one. The first thing we can do is that we can eliminate situations in which will cause us to be tempted. Because the Bible calls us to flee temptation, to run away, to get away from temptation. When you feel temptation, leave. But it's also important that we don't just run away from that sin or that temptation, but that we run to the right things. Because the Israelites left, right? And they were fleeing Egypt, but they weren't going anywhere for a while. And if you look at the journey they took, they walked around for 40 years to make a journey that would have taken them not nearly the time. It's because they were running from Egypt, but they weren't really running to anything. So that's my encouragement to you. So whenever you're running, you flee temptation, don't just run aimlessly. Run to Jesus. Run to God. And the way we do that is by reading His Word and by praying and by staying connected to Him. I know we hear that a lot, right? We pray, we read our Word, but that really is true. I mean, I want you to think about it that way, that when you're fleeing temptation, that you're going to Jesus. Because usually we have one of the other. It's very seldom that sometimes we have both. Sometimes we're really good at getting out of situations, but then we don't go to Jesus. We don't go to our Word. We don't pray. Sometimes for me, I have to get to a point where when I'm struggling with something or that I'm feeling temptation, that I actually get on my knees. And I don't just pray in my head. We do that a lot. I pray in my head a lot. But sometimes I just have to get on my knees and say, verbally, just speak to God as if He is right there in front of me. Sometimes we have to do that because sometimes it makes it so much more real. We're not just talking to a voice in our head. We're talking to a living God. And so I want to challenge you some of you may need to do that. To make God personal to you. That way when you run from sin, you know you're running to something that is powerful. Something that can save you. Something that can free you from that thing. Last thing I'm going to talk to you about is surrounding yourself with the right people. In the time that we live in today, it's so easy to surround ourselves with just people we get along with. People that make us laugh. People that give us a certain social status that we want. It's so easy to seek friendships with those people. I want to ask you something about the friends that we're hanging around, the friends that we make. Are those people building you up? Are those people people that you can go to, that you can talk to about Jesus and burdens that you have, or real deep conversation? Can you have those conversations about Jesus and about questions that you have with that person? Or is it too awkward? Or are you afraid that they'll judge you? Because it's important that we have those friendships that will build us up. They're not just casual friendships that everything's just always fun and games. So it's great to have fun with those people. But you need people who are going to build you up. You need people you can trust. You need people that you can go to in your time of need. And so I want to challenge you in that also, that you will do those things. So are you tired of your sin? Or are you done with it? And then once you decide that you're done, there are 3 things we need to do. The first thing we need to do is flee temptation. The second thing we need to do is go to Jesus. And the third thing we need to do is surround ourselves with people who will build us up and get us closer to Jesus. Let me pray for you before we leave. God, thank you for our time together. God, thank you for, Lord, all that you've done in this time where we're dealing with this virus and not being at school and not being able to go to church. God, but I pray that this time is not just spent taking advantage of this time and just having a good time, but we also take the time that we have off, God, to just draw near to you. Because your word says if we draw near to you, you'll draw near to us. So that's my prayer, God, that you would just draw near to us. We find out some things about ourselves during this time. some things that we may struggle with, and that we can learn to flee from those things. We can learn to run to you in our time of trouble, our time of need, and that we'll surround ourselves with people who will bring us closer to you. And I praise things in your wonderful, in your powerful name. Amen.